For lesson 4, we'll be talking about ordering rational numbers. So rational numbers are fractions, decimals that can be written as fractions, and any of our whole numbers, integers, things like that, positive or negative. So if we want to put these in order, the easiest way to do it is to use a number line. So we're actually going to skip over this first one and go to exercise 2. So on your notes, you can skip it. So plot and label the following points on the number line below. Anytime you see a mixed number, like in point A, you got to change it. Or sorry, anytime you see an improper fraction, like in point A, you got to change it to a mixed number. So keep it negative. 2 goes into 5 twice with 1 left over, 2.5. Negative 2.5. So starting at 0, if we want a negative number, we're going to go to the left. So I'm going to go -1, -2. And I need to go halfway between the -2 and the -3. So I'm going to put it about here. That's point A. Now, if I'm doing point B, still negative, so still to the left, but this one is actually between 0 and 1. So I can't quite go to a half because remember, a half is 0.5. So -0.4 is not quite halfway, which would be like here. So I'm going to go ahead and just put my mark for point B right here. Okay. For C, we have +2.5. So in the positive direction, 1, 2, and then halfway would be point C. And D, -2.1. So now with this one, we're going to go -1, -2, and then slightly past it. So I'm just going to go ahead and write it right there, as close as I can get to the -2. And that's point C. Sorry, point D. Okay, -45 hundredths. That actually also sounds like this decimal, and we're going to review that in a minute. But this is telling me that it's slightly less than a half, because remember, a half is this. But when it's negative, that means it's slightly more. So we're not going to go quite as far away from 0. So here would be half, right? And we already have point B, which is -0.4 or 0.40. So we have to go slightly past point B. So that one's a little tricky. But if I'm looking at B and E, point E is slightly smaller, slightly more negative than point B. So it's slightly more to the left when we draw it in. Okay, now moving on to the next one. Point F, 1.95. That's very close to 2. So I'm just going to go right up next to the 2. 1 and 9/10. That's also pretty close to 2. But remember, 1 and 9/10 is also just 1.9. It's pretty close, but it is not quite at 1.95. So I'm just going to go slightly before that point F, because it's slightly smaller, so slightly to the left. And then finally, -1.9. So I'm going to go -1, and then I'm going to go just a little bit before the -2, so maybe right here. And that will be my final point, point H. Okay? Now we're going to actually take a look at some questions down below to look at how some of these numbers compare. So it says to list the numbers from exercise 2 in order from least to greatest, and we're going to use our inequality symbols. So least to greatest literally means left to right. So from left to right, it's going to be point A is less than point D, which is less than point H. We just go in order. Less than point E, less than point B. I'm just going in order. G, which is less than F, which is less than C. So the biggest one is point C. The smallest one is point A. We can see that from our list and from our number line. Now the next question, number 2, is asking us to say if there are any opposites. So actually, I'm going to go back up to the list, and I'm going to look around here. So I do see -2.5 and then +2.5. And I also see 1.9 and -1.9. Nothing else looks like it's opposites. So we're going to write in A and C, G and H are opposites, meaning the signs are different. Okay, point B is greater than which other points plotted above. So if it's greater, that means it's to the right of them. So here's point B. Anything that it's greater than, it has to be to the right of. So we're looking at anything that's less than B, so to the left. So I see A, D, H, and E. Okay, now I'm going to erase that so we can see it again. Point A is less than which other points? Well, actually, point A is to the left of literally everything, right? Look, everything's right of it, which means that point A is smaller than everything else above. So I'm going to say all other points above. Okay? And now moving on. Another option, and we kind of did this a little bit already, is actually just to convert fractions and decimals, convert between them so that we can determine which one is bigger or smaller. So this is review from Unit 2, our decimals unit, where we're going to change fractions to decimals and opposite order. So to change a fraction to a decimal, first, make sure that if it's a mixed number, it gets changed into an improper fraction. Then, as long as it looks like a fraction, you can use long division to divide the numerator by the denominator. So the top by the bottom. Okay? Just make sure that you don't leave a remainder. Go all the way to the end. Add a decimal point and as many zeros as you need to get an end or to get something that starts to repeat. Okay? Now, if you need to do it the other way around, a decimal to a fraction, in this case, you just want to read the decimal as a fraction using place value. So really quick, like 0.9 is 9/10. More complicated ones, you'll have to make sure that you simplify them. Okay, so always be on the lookout for that. Now let's try a couple examples here. So if we want to put some numbers in order from least to greatest, the best thing to do is turn them all into one type. It totally doesn't matter what you do. Whichever one you're more comfortable with will work. Okay, so I have the opposite of 3.5, which I know is negative 3.5, right? And then I have negative 3 1/4, positive 3, positive 13 over 4. Let me just change that. 4 goes into 13 3 times with 1 left over. So that's going to be positive 3 1/4. So now we've got negative 3.5, negative 3 1/4, 3, and then 3 1/4. So definitely I can do the 3 is less than 3 1/4. And then I know that these other two are going to have to be smaller. But we have to decide, is negative 3.5 the smallest or is negative 3 1/4 the smallest? Easiest way to do this is just to take negative 3.5. That's negative 3 5/10. Simplify by 5s, negative 3 1/2. So if you write that in, negative 3 1/2 is definitely the smallest here. So remember that negative numbers, the bigger they are when they're positive, the smaller they are when they're negative. Okay, so there's our final answer there. And lastly, multiple choice question to put them in order from least to greatest. This is a little easier because we can actually cross out options that don't make sense. So first of all, the least numbers would be the negative ones. So if you have positives at the beginning, that means it's wrong. The positives should be at the end of the list because they're the biggest ones. So looking at B, there's this random positive in the middle followed by a negative. So B also doesn't work. And now looking here, the only difference between C and D is we flip-flopped the order of some of these. Which one is the smallest? Negative 9.5 or negative 9? So remember, 9.5 is bigger when it's positive, so it's actually smaller when it's negative, which means that C is the correct choice for number 2. Okay, we're just going to look at our reflection question. How can we compare different types of rational numbers to put them in order from least to greatest?